Iniziamo. Poi gli facciamo vedere questo. Bravo.
Welcome to everybody. We apologize for this delay. We were waiting for the translator, but they are missed in the traffic jam of Rome. So we start because it's already 20 past 10, and we hope we have to speak English now. We hope that the Italian guests do not have problems. In case, we will switch a little bit to Italian. We would like really to welcome you all, and especially the foreign guests who came here in Rome. We welcome you with a very nice time. You see weather, you see, so we try to do our best. So, and we also would like to welcome you on behalf of INAPP Director General, of the Director of the Erasmus Plus National Agency, and the Director General of the Ministry of Labour and Labour Market and Social Policy, who unfortunately couldn't join us today, but wish all of us a great success for this event. This transnational thematic activity concludes the several events which have been organized by our national agency in the framework of the European Vocational Skills Week. You might probably know that this is an initiative which was launched by the European Commission in 2016 with the aim to enhancing vocational education and training and to make it a first choice. To offer great visibility to vocational education and training pathways, which are not so often chosen by learners and students all over Europe. And this thematic event is also part of the activities of the national team of ECVET experts, which is coordinated by our national agency. Europe, as you know, is facing crucial challenges to this fast-changing world and labor market with evolving skills needs. And in this scenario, the Erasmus Plus program plays really a key role in providing opportunities also through the transnational mobility experience involving learners in work-based experiences. Both short and long duration, we will see later on. We know that while short duration mobility experiences have a clear instinct value, longer placement have a higher value in providing job-specific skills. And this is the reason why the Commission is investing a lot on this new mobility trend of long duration, so from 3 to 12 months.
And I'm Valentina Violi, and I will be...
Sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Michela Volpe, and she's Valentina Violi.
And you already had contacts with us in previous days and years in some cases. My colleague Michela is the national coordinator of the ECVET experts national team in Italy, and we are very pleased and honored to have here with us ECVET experts from other countries participating in the Erasmus Plus program. And so I really like the idea of sharing with them our knowledge, our skills, and to take on board their expertise, because we really believe in cooperation and we strongly wanted to organize a transnational cooperation activity on such theme, which is quite technical, difficult to explore, but which is at the core of the EU vocational education and training agenda from our point of view. Because skills, Michela mentioned skills. Skills are crucial in a fast-changing world, as we said. And skills developed within work-based settings can effectively respond as my colleague said, to a fast-changing labor market, where even the jobs of today won't be there tomorrow. And in such awareness, the European Commission is revising its priorities. The revision, which took place 5 years ago, is producing now effects, and we will talk about the Riga conclusions and the policy objectives. We will ask you what you know about it. So try to brainstorm during the next 20 seconds about the Riga conclusions and the policy priorities of the European Commission, because we will ask you about it. But where are we now? As you know, today we are talking about transparency of skills, learning outcomes acquired within work-based settings, in particular within apprenticeships, which is kind of a weakness of our Italian national context, because it's really strongly promoted by the labor market national authorities, by our national authority, which is the Ministry of Labor and Social Policies, but yet, unfortunately, it's not so exploited by national enterprises, both small, medium, and large enterprises. There is so much to do through a strong network involving all relevant stakeholders. And that's what we are trying to do today. We are trying to create a small cooperation settings. Probably you already talked to each other. There are many ECVET providers, many companies, representatives from the chambers, and that's the ideal setting to explore all the criticalities, the opportunities, the benefits together. This is just an approximate overview with drawn data from an EU platform that as national agencies we have the opportunity to use, which is the dashboard. Probably you already heard of it, and you will heard of it a lot again in the next years, because my colleague from Sweden is smiling, because probably he knows that an open dashboard will be available in just a few years. So all actors working in education and training will have the opportunity to access open data concerning the implementation of the program and of other related initiatives working on education and training. As you can see, we have just identified the countries which are here today, and Poland, where are the Polish colleagues, the colleagues from Poland? Yeah, you are winning in such panel of countries, because from the approximate data which we have drawn, as I told you, we have really a huge number of apprentices in the vocational education and training mobility funded by the Erasmus Plus program up to the 2019. Those are partial data. We are going towards the 2020 that, as you know better than us, will conclude the Erasmus Plus program and will launch us towards the new Erasmus program, which will feature stable, I think, characteristics, and we'll talk about it later today. So with an EU average of approximately the 20% of learners in vocational education and training mobility experiences involved in Erasmus Plus, there is a lot to do, a lot of opportunities to be explored. And we'll also talk about some specific case studies, 3 excellent initiatives from our point of view that involve apprentices. We will have the opportunity to listen to the experience of a large enterprise, which is E Plus Distribuzione, which is a company, a branch of Enel, which is, you might know, it's the more important, the first, the more important electricity and energy provider at national level. So I want to thank Lorenzo for being here today, and Annalisa Palano from Uniser that has worked in strong cooperation, it's a ECVET provider, with the company to help and exploring such opportunity. And I have to thank in particular the 2 apprentices, Lorenzo and Nicolas, that will talk with us later and will tell us about the benefits, the criticalities and the opportunities. And then I have to thank the case study concerning another apprenticeship opportunity really exploited effectively, which is the Istituto di Fondazione Lepido Rocco, that is here with the director Vicentin, and not only the director Vicentin, I want to thank you, but the responsible for the Frigo Point SRL, the enterprise that took this initiative to be involved in the program with an apprenticeship, which is Alessandro Villani, that will talk with us later. And last but not the least, absolutely, la professoressa Noccioli, there it is. She's from Florence, she's from the Istituto Salvemini Duca d'Aosta, a vet school, which is involving apprentices for the qualification. It's one of the different types of apprentices that we have in Italy, but that's really, from our point of view, it's one of the larger gap to be filled, to put the apprenticeships, such scheme of work-based learning within the vocational education and training pathways, which is kind of the usual practice for other countries, but this is not for Italy. So I'm sure that the cooperation will help us also better exploiting such opportunity. We want really an informal setting. We want a cooperation initiative. So please feel free to interrupt us, to ask questions, to provide also additional information. The colleague from Sweden, Camilla, she's an ECVET expert. She was in the European Commission a few days ago, and maybe she will share with us some updates concerning ECVET implementation in the next program later on, when we will get to such theme, if you wish. So, I've just told you the Riga conclusions of June 2015. Those were, I would say, a milestone in the evolution of the vocational education and training policies. And 5 priorities were set as short-term deliverable for 2020, so it's there, we are going there, it's already there, it's just 3 months and we'll be there. And so we want to understand with you what priorities were identified in such strong cooperation between national authorities, governments, EU candidate countries, besides EU countries, social partners and vet providers, a large panel of stakeholders which took stock of what was achieved and defined together where we were going. If I just tell you WBL, what would you say? What would pop up to your mind? Word-based learning, great. And then something more? Nothing more. Word-based learning in all its form, with a particular attention on apprenticeships, was identified as a priority area of action by involving social partners, companies, chambers, vet providers, and stimulating entrepreneurship and innovation. Innovation in systems, entrepreneurship attitudes in learners, which is not only the idea of developing a business of their own, but the idea of being able to adapt to a changing system, and probably also to the idea of changing many work experience during a career. And so in such specific perspective, the European Alliance for Apprenticeship was launched a few years ago, and e-distribuzione plays a major role in such initiative because they were awarded, and then we will talk about it. They were identified and recognized as a better experience of apprenticeship concerning large enterprises. We will talk about the European framework for quality and effective apprenticeships, but we can take back some indications which my colleagues gave you before. Skills, job-related skills, but also personal competencies and key competencies can be better developed. We are all aware of that within work-based opportunities. Why? To stimulate access, to stimulate the access of young people to the labor market, But such a challenging goal can only be realized within well-established, well-designed apprenticeship schemes that benefit both learners and employers through reinforced links between world of work and world of education and training. And if I just say quality, ECVET, great. Quality meant as quality assurance in vocational education and training pathways. It's an acquis communautaire, I would say, like ECVET, the implementation of a recommendation that you probably heard or maybe also apply, I hope, in your daily work. So the idea was to further develop quality assurance mechanism within vocational education and training pathways, which looks like something very technical, but practically speaking, it is about creating trust between an employer and the qualification that the employee is bringing to him. Is the qualification really reflecting competences? I can really trust that those competences can be really put in place by that worker. It will be possible only if an effective quality assurance mechanism is put in place. From the design of the vocational education and training pathways or learning opportunities, and we're talking about work-based opportunities, to the implementation, to the assessment of those competencies, valorization and recognition.
If we speak about transparency, so
that's a trick. That's a trick.
It's a trick. So
my magician colleague.
Yeah, I try to. So of course, what does it mean? Try to really put in transparency the learning outcomes achieved, the competencies, and in order to make, no matter where learning outcomes are achieved, what is important today in a really fast-changing labor market is that the learning outcomes are transparent, are visible, so that everyone can use them no matter the context in which they are acquired. Another, of course, relevant goal that was set in Riga, you see key, so this should come to your mind, another key word, which is key competencies. Today we know that there are some competencies that everyone should get, no matter the job they are going to face. We are speaking about language competencies, digital competencies, and so on. So, and we need to help vet pathways to provide these key competencies to learners so that they could, not only to young learners, but also to adults who are reskilling and upskilling their profile, so that they can really be competitive in this changing labor market.
So skills are back at the core of our setting today. And if we say of trainers, we are talking about those professionals. Many of them are here with us today. And why? Why are we talking about trainers? We're talking about all the vocational education and training professionals. And the idea of the revised Riga conclusions was to enhance the opportunities for the development of vocational education and training teachers, tutors, coaches, mentors. Those are the professionals which are so relevant in our debate today, because guiding through a work-based learning pathways is something completely different. In some cases it is, and it requires different specific competencies which must be developed, which must be translated into specific learning and upskilling, I would say, opportunities. Good teaching is essential, and it makes, really, it can change life, guiding through a process, opening up new perspectives, also exploring at the best the potential of both the learners and the opportunities, work-based opportunities available. What else do you say?
So, of course, we cannot forget several tools and initiatives that have been developed in Europe to support the development of quality and effective apprenticeship, to support modernization of that pathways. Here we just mentioned, let's say, the most relevant ones that you probably know. We are here today in the framework of European Credit System for Vocational Education and Training, which is this framework which was launched already 10 years ago by the European Commission to really make easier for VET learners, especially for VET learners, to receive validation and recognition of learning outcomes achieved in different learning contexts, in different countries. At European level, there is a governance of the ECVET system, and which is managed by the ECVET Secretariat. Here in the link that you will then find the presentation on our website. You can find in this website of the ECVET Secretariat a lot of useful information for those of you who are not so well experienced and familiar with ECVET, so with the recognition of learning outcomes. Here you might find some useful information. Practical example of, for example, enterprises or VET providers who already experienced and tested some ECVET tools. Probably all of you already know about Memorandum of Understanding, Learning Agreement, and so on. So we are not telling you something new, but for those who are not so familiar here, they can find some useful information and also a mobility toolkit, which might be useful for to start first steps in this scenario. Then, of course, we already mentioned the European Quality Reference Framework for Quality Assurance. We will speak later on a little bit on detail on the Council recommendation for European Framework for Quality and Effective Apprenticeships, and also the European Alliance for Apprenticeship. Today, there is also the European Apprentices Network. We would like to mention it because it's a kind of network which gathers those apprentices all over Europe who have been engaged in apprenticeship experiences and who are some kind of ambassadors of this activity. Today we mentioned in the framework of the European Vocational Skills Week, this initiative which was launched by the Commission to make VET first choice, and then there is also the working group on that. So you see that there is a lot of tools and initiatives going all over Europe, and of course there are also a lot of financial instruments and support. First of all, the Erasmus Plus program, but then there is also, of course, the European Social Fund, and you know that in the Future program, the Commission is asking to increase the synergies with the European Social Fund. So it's time to start thinking to really increase the connection between mainly Erasmus Plus and the European Social Fund, so that we can really maximize the impact of this support. And then there are also some specific programs.
Okay. Just a few words back on the Alliance for Apprenticeships. It can be really useful because the idea is to improve the quality, the supply, and the image of apprenticeships in Europe, while promoting the transnational mobility of apprentices. Why we are coming back to such initiative? Because support services and documentation are available on the EAFA platform. So in case of doubts, in case of need for just a template, a format, or maybe just the idea of getting in contact with somebody who already developed an effective apprenticeship scheme and implemented it in a specific different sector or sectoral field or a specific geographic area, you have the opportunity to get in contact with experienced providers, enterprises, companies. So it's really a resource to exploit. You want to have a look at the video, or we already did it? No, we can switch it off. It's kind of late. So coming back again to skills. Why skills? Those are, I told you, at the core of the current evolution of the vocational education and training pathways, with the idea of exploiting skills as a leverage for employability, for competitiveness, for a strengthening of the human capital from a personal and professional point of view. The new skills agenda for Europe was adopted in 2016 with the idea of providing and making available the right training to everyone across Europe, the right skills to everyone across Europe, and the needed, required, addressed, tailored support. 10 actions were launched through 3 different strands of actions: improving the quality and the relevance of training opportunities and other ways of acquiring skills. We're talking about work-based pathways, making skills more visible, more comparable, and we're just talking about the transparency that Michaela mentioned and all the related tools which are under revision, and she will explain you in what sense, and improve skills intelligence. Have you ever heard about skills intelligence? Do you know what we're talking about? I said that's interesting. It means information. You knew it. You're always a step ahead. No, you didn't. So skills intelligence means sharing information and understanding job prospects, demands for jobs, and demands for skills. You might know that the CEDEFOP is the agency in charge for the European Commission of analyzing trends in the labor market, trends in skills, to help European citizens to make career choices aware of where the job market is going. So the idea of developing awareness throughout Europe on skills which will be needed, on jobs which will be there, and jobs which won't be there. That's the idea of behind skills intelligence. So supporting, analyzing job patterns, job trends, and sharing such information through 10 actions. And in such framework, in 2016, the Vocational Skills Week was launched within the VET chapter action, as well as several initiatives which were, in a sense, put in a bigger picture together. Upskilling pathways, that's for adults. Many of you are also working on the adult learning field. EQF, the development of EQF and implementation within the national systems. And also more specific initiatives. I would suggest you to go in depth within the New Skills Agenda for Europe EU EC website, because there are also many interesting information concerning inclusion aspects. For example, EU skills profile for third country nationals, newly arrived migrants and refugees, some tools to identify the competences available and create ad hoc pathways. So there is really a lot to learn to explore successful project applications. Just a step ahead, the same year, in December 2016, the Commission launched a commission focused on Europe's youth with a package of initiatives for youngsters across Europe, with 3 strands of actions that better focus a few of the initiatives which are already in place, with a focus on learning mobility and two specific actions which were subsequently developed, which are the European Framework for Quality and Effective Apprenticeships and the long-term mobility in Erasmus. The Erasmus Pro activity was created in such scenario to focus the project planning and implementation towards a longer mobility, possibly a longer mobility of apprentices. Through a few 14 quality criteria which were defined in a framework, in a council recommendation of March 2019, which launched a European framework for quality and effective apprenticeships to create a common language across European countries and define what criteria should be there to define a work-based experience, a quality work-based experience, a quality apprenticeship, and an effective one. Which are the 14 criteria? Can you imagine, or maybe you know, are there some criteria that you can already imagine which should be there? There are learning conditions and framework conditions. Maybe we can also go home because it's quite
Sorry,
late.
for those who need translation, the translator has just come, so you can use your
great.
headphone.
Is it working?
Yeah, it's,
Yeah?
yeah, we hear the voice. Okay.
Is it fine? Yeah? Great. The European Framework for Quality and Effective Apprenticeships set in a comprehensive framework criteria which are related to learning outcomes, the delivery of a set of comprehensive learning outcomes defined on the basis in compliance with national laws, clearly agreed by employers, vocational education and training institutions, and social partners to ensure a balance between job-specific skills and key competences, the importance of which has already been explored clearly by Michela before, to support lifelong learning, personal development and career prospects with a view to adapt to changing career patterns. Further criteria are framework conditions, the involvement of social partners in the design, governance and implementation of schemes, as well as for company a support, financial and non-financial. It should be envisaged in a cost-effective approach with maybe possibly a cost-sharing arrangement between public authorities and employers, and the financial side of apprenticeship implementation. It's really an interesting area to explore, and we will have the opportunity to talk about it later together. And criteria for framework conditions concerning flexible pathways and mobility. The idea to take on board relevant informal and non-formal learning to facilitate the access to apprenticeship schemes, and in a holistic perspective, qualifications acquired through apprenticeships should be included in nationally recognized qualification frameworks, reference to the EQF, with a focus, with a particular attention devoted to the transnational mobility of apprentices. And in such scenario, Erasmus Plus plays the role of a pioneer, a leverage, and we hope through the expanded doubling of the funding for the new program, also the possibility to put such mobility in place as a stable system action. And we will talk about it and how it will be possible, we hope.
And in line with what Valentina has just said, speaking about long-term mobility of apprentices, you might probably know, because I'm sure you already put in practice this kind of initiative. In 2016, also this new strand of mobility called Erasmus Pro, which was actually already in place, but was really boosted and emphasized by the Commission to answer to the European Parliament input, asking for putting in place initiatives that could really support and the increase of quality, attractiveness and employability of that learners. So this initiative was launched and called Erasmus Pro. to boost the long-term mobility of, in particular, of apprentices. So the idea is really to provide learners, but mainly apprentices going abroad for long periods, so from 3 to 12 months, with those competencies, with those skills which are really key and crucial in the labor market and are especially crucial for apprentices. Because we know that all the learners going abroad in Erasmus plus transnational mobility, of course, develop transversal competencies, increase their language competencies, but the added value is really that one to develop specific job skills competencies, but also to really become more familiar. And this is something that also the guys will tell us later. To become familiar with foreign languages, different culture, different working contexts, which is something that today we have to really get used to, because we cannot think about a national or a regional and even really local labor markets. So if we put together the idea of a transnational placement for a long time, mainly for apprentices, we cannot, of course, we cannot avoid to think about putting in transparency to valorize and to use in the best possible way the learning outcomes achieved within this transparency. And so we come to the, let's say, to the theme of this event. ECVET, for those of you who are familiar, and its principles and the learning outcomes approach and the tools provided by this framework can be really useful to really validate the learning outcomes achieved and also to reach, if possible, in the best really possible scenario, to reach also the formal recognition of this learning outcome, which is really key for those experiences who are longer, because the learning outcomes achieved are really key and need to be used immediately in the labor market.
Just a few basic information for our foreign colleagues which are here today, just to say that at national level, 3 types of apprenticeship are in place. Who knows all the 3 types? Italian colleagues? Yes, somebody knows? 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5. Okay, just I hope the majority of you. And we will explore with you today 2 specific types. The apprenticeship for the vocational qualification and diploma, which is in Italian apprendistato per la qualifica, which enables the acquisition of a vocational qualification at upper secondary level, and the professional apprenticeship, which is the, in Italian, apprendistato professionalizzante, which is the mostly known probably at national level and exploited. While through the program we are effectively exploiting both. The third type concerns higher education and research apprenticeships at post-secondary level. Yeah. Questions about it? No, you are in the first strand and you will tell about it. Try to put in place all the information in a comprehensive framework.
Okay, so if we think about the European strategy addressed to modernize that, we cannot skip, of course, also a reflection on ECVET, on the main impact that this tool has already produced in 10 years of implementation. And many of you already know that the Commission launched this study, whose findings have been just published at the beginning of this year, on EUVET instruments, in particular on ECVET and ECVET. As you can see, really shortly summarized in this slide, and that I think that almost not all, but many of you can confirm that the main impact of ECVET was that one related to the improvement of quality in mobility experiences, in particular within Erasmus+. So this was one of the main objectives ECVET was meant to, but of course it was not the only one. It also contributed a lot, and this is something, this is really a great goal, to create a kind of common language, because if today we speak about learning outcomes, I think that almost all of us know what we are speaking about. And it provided, of course, really useful tools and documentation which can really support the validation and recognition of learning outcomes achieved in mobility. As you can see on the top right, to be honest, we cannot say that it contributed a lot. In some countries it did, but not a lot, to the flexibility of VET pathways, because the number of countries having a unit-based or modular VET system, even though increasing, it's still not so really widespread. And, of course, it did not contribute to the creation of a European credit system, which was really the main goal, as it is for ECTS in the higher education field. So this is a lesson we have to take on board if we think to the future of this tool. And that's why the Commission is really, thanks to the finding of this study, reflecting on possible scenarios for ECVET, but also for ECVET. Because the idea is really to learn from the past and to invest on what functioned well and to improve what did not work, actually. So, at the moment, following really several consultations and of stakeholders, these are the two main options which are on discussion for the future of ECVET. Either using it as a VET mobility tool, because we saw that it worked on this field, so to support the quality of mobility experiences and mainstreaming it within Erasmus program. The other idea is to incorporating ECVET principles within a wider VET strategy. So which means working on one side, continue to work on flexibility of VET, on learning outcome approach, also through the already existing tools, which is EQF, validation, and integrating ECVET in an overarching, let's say, VET recommendation. And also using and streamlining, because this was really strongly required by stakeholders, streamlining the already existing tools like Memorandum of Understanding and Learning Agreement into Europass, into also the new Erasmus program. Because to be honest, I understand that providers who get confused with all these tools. There are too many, EQF, ECVET, ECVET, and so on. So the need to streamline is really strong all over Europe. So then if we think to the future, we have to think also to the future of Erasmus program. We are reaching really the end of this programming period, and the Commission started since really long time to design the future framework of the program. And in its proposal launched last year, the Commission, as you can see there, asked to double the funding for Erasmus Plus in order to get 12 million people going abroad thanks to the program. But you already know that the European Parliament and the European Commission, the Commission President-elect Ursula von der Leyen asked to triple the budget. So we might expect, because negotiations are still ongoing, but we might expect that we won't have not only 30 billion euros for the next 7 years, but probably also more, reaching 45 euros, if negotiations goes in the right way. What is important is that the Commission President-elect Ursula von der Leyen stressed a lot the importance of the program, so that's why she really supported the Parliament in tripling the budget. The importance that the program has already had, and we will have even more in the future in stressing in modernizing and increasing the quality of VET. She asked to stress the work-based component of the program and also the role of dual vocational education and training. So that's why we decided to organize this event today, because this is not only a relevant theme today, but it will become even more strategic in the near future. And also the commission and designate Nicholas Schmidt for jobs. I wanted to mention this quote because I think it's really effective. He said that wherever VET systems are strong, youth unemployment is low. And this is something that we have to really consider and not to forget. So that's why we have to invest on apprentices and we have to invest on excellent VET pathways responding to the labor market's needs. Just really briefly to introduce the new program, because negotiations are ongoing, but some steps are already fixed. There will be a really high focus on mobility, on quality of mobility, also on the international dimension of mobility, also for VET. You already know that for higher education, there is the possibility for university students to go in countries outside Europe. And this possibility will be also offered to VET learners starting from 2021. There will be a mixed mobility, meaning both physical and virtual mobility. But of course, the transparency of competencies or learning outcomes will be the key of the future. We see also in this slide, really, we just try to summarize some key words for that, and you see that some words are important: inclusion, excellence, flexibility, efficiency, and international dimension. Because the program wants to be even more inclusive than it is now, but he wants also to really invest a lot in innovation, inequality, and of course, making learning outcomes visible. It continue to be really crucial. Just really a few words about these slides. Many of you know that our national agency organizes since really long time this survey addressed to Erasmus Plus VET providers in order to really gather some information on the level of knowledge about ECVET, on practical use, on experiences gained with this tool. And as you see, that what came out from the European studies confirmed also by the Italian organization. You see that for those organizations who put in practice some tools of ECVET, the memorandum of understanding reached almost 19%. So it means that now Europass and memorandum of understanding and learning agreement are tools which are in practice used by all the VET providers organizing mobility experiences. While even though there is a great increase, we are still a little bit more weak in terms of validation and recognition of learning outcomes. Then, really just shortly, we also asked which is the main added value which comes from the use of, from the testing of these tools within the transnational mobility. And you see that these are some of the items mentioned by the VET providers. So this tool helps to facilitate the recognition of school work alternance experiences carried out. And it strengthened the assessment of learning outcomes, facilitated the school work connection. So I'm not telling you something new, you really perfectly know this, but this is just to show you that the main aim that was meant for ECVET, actually it works also in Italy. And if we ask also if this tool facilitates somehow the recognition of learning outcomes, especially in the long-term experiences, and you see that almost half of the providers said that it highly supported this recognition. So this is really just a short overview, but to show you that it is really highly used by Italian promoters involved in transnational mobility. So let's come to some food for thought, because we also have some real food on your on your back, but we would like also to provide you some food to reflect and to animate the discussion, because we are here to learn from you, not to teach you, because you are those working in practice, so you are the ones to tell us what works actually and what does not. We of course, we saw really a lot of time that transnational mobility of apprentices, it is really a key element of apprenticeship experiences, and it should be more strongly promoted despite the criticalities that we know are in place, but it should be really strongly promoted as requested by the European Commission. And that's to put in place quality and effective apprenticeship, we need good, relevant structure, well-designed and stable partnership involving relevant stakeholders.
The longer mobility and longer placements abroad will be there in the 2020 call and in the next program. So mobility within vocational education training pathways, work-based experiences should become a standard for across all the vocational education and training system. That's the ambition of the Commission, to be stimulated in a bottom-up approach through the implementation of the program. For the specific added value represented by the experience of work abroad, also to reinforce a sense of European citizenship, to enhance assured awareness of EU values. So a mobility which has a double soul, a job and skills development soul, and together the idea of a leverage that involves in a bigger picture, in a bigger awareness of European citizenship. With a last but not least high value of the valorization of the learning outcomes achieved in particular abroad, which are crucial to fully exploit the employment potential of the related initiative. And all those key words and elements will be the basis of our joint work today. We will leave you just for a 5 minutes break for a coffee that you deserve after the food for thought, and we hope we share with you useful, fruitful information. Thank you.
5 minutes.
Grazie, addirittura. Applauso. Musica in coffee.